Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Grand Elder, I refuse to believe the things that Shui Mei said. Not one little bit. In my heart, you are as holy as a lotus, something the filth of the world can't even come close to touching. You are as beautiful as a sea immortal, completely beyond the sordid dirtiness of the world around you. As he got more emotional, the pain in his eyes grew more intense. Grand Elder, allow me to tell you what kind of person you are in my heart. I dream of you night and day. You are an eternal safe haven for my soul, the ideal immortal goddess, something pure and sacred that I must protect for my whole life. Bai Xiaochun's sorrow and despair was making him shake, and the disappointment he felt in his heart was turning into a madness that was exploding out as if it had been suppressed for far too long. He swished his sleeve, and a bit of a murderous aura began to emanate off of him, as if he couldn't suppress it any longer. It was as if he had climbed a mountain of corpses and waded through a sea of blood to get where he was. Even his veins of steel began to show through. I, Night Crypt, can't even count how many people I've killed in my life. I am as vicious as they get. I've lost touch with my humanity, with my feelings, with my passion. I am like an empty shell filled with nothing but the coldness of slaughter and brutality. However, in the emptiness, there is a spark of light. And that light sparked into being when I first laid eyes on you, Grand Elder. A tremor ran through Song Junwan's beautiful frame. She almost seemed to be in a daze as she stared at the disappointment in Bai Xiaochun's eyes. There was pain and grief there, as if something beautiful and holy which he had been completely attached to, had collapsed. It was as if his entire world had fallen apart, and he was now descending into hysteria. I didn't choose Middle Peak, Grand Elder, I chose you. You talk about my lewd stare, but you are mistaken. I have never looked at you in such a way. Every time I look at you, I just want to protect you. By this point, his bloodshot eyes overflowed with pain as he shouted, Grand Elder, the person standing in front of me right now is not you. Put on your clothes. Get that look off your face. Enough with the flirting. I want to see the pure and unsullied Song Junwan that exists in my heart, the person that I, Night Crypt, wish to protect for my whole life. Return to me that which is the light of my life. From Bai Xiaochun's twisted expression, he almost seemed to be going insane. His roaring voice echoed about in the immortals' cave, causing the hot spring waters to vibrate. It almost seemed as if he were giving vent to his deepest emotions. Imposter Night Crypt's soul was shaken as he observed the actions of Bai Xiaochun, stupefied by how realistic his wording was, and how his emotions seemed so real. The immortals' cave was quiet for a moment, but then Bai Xiaochun began to chuckle hoarsely. Sounding disappointed and hurt, he quietly turned away so that he wasn't looking at Song Junwan. He was trembling, although the truth was that it was from fear. As soon as he had stepped into the immortal's cave, he had sensed the intangible coldness inside, and he realized that nothing he had planned on the way over would work. He could only improvise. As soon as Song Junwan emerged from the water, he knew that he had to exercise utmost caution, lest he be finished. This stinking shrew is completely nefarious. Bai Xiaochun really felt as if he'd gotten the short end of the stick. How could he ever have imagined that Song Junwan would be so vicious? Clearly she knew that the patriarchs liked him, and that he was also very famous in the sect. That was why she had chosen to use such tactics on him. It's a good thing Bai Xiaochun is no fool, he thought. Let's see what trick she pulls next. Remaining completely vigilant, he waited for Song Junwan to make her next move. Song Junwan's mind was spinning, and she was trembling visibly. Bai Xiaochun's words had stabbed deep into her heart, like the sharpest of blades. Now that she stood there looking at his back, he seemed taller than ever, as though he could support heaven and earth on his shoulders. She wasn't even sure what to say. Night Crypt had completely shaken her to the core. It felt like a mountain had fallen onto her, something that broke down all the barriers in her mind and left her soul exposed. She could only stand there quietly trying to calm the chaos in her heart. Her original intention had been to call Night Crypt over to try to find a reason to punish him. If she could lock him up in blood prison, then she could definitely stop any gossip from spreading. Furthermore, it would make it impossible for Shui Mei to kill him, which would mean that she would have won the competition between the two of them. Who would have ever thought that the seemingly lewd Night Crypt would fall to pieces because of her clothing and her actions? She was especially moved by his last words, when he asked her to bring back the real Song Junwan. That left her thoroughly moved, and suddenly caused something different to appear in her eyes when she looked at him. Song Junwan took a deep breath. Slowly, the flirtatious expression she usually wore faded away. She waved her hand, and a more conservative garment flew over and settled onto her. She adjusted her hair and straightened up a bit, and suddenly seemed very different. Instead of looking seductive, she seemed truly dignified and beautiful. She wasn't very old to begin with, but with this attire, she seemed completely different than before. Inside and out, she radiated a natural grace and charm that made her seem dazzling. Her skin was fair and white, and without all the makeup, she seemed like clouds reflected on snow. Her hair was now coiled together into a beautiful bun, and as she looked at Bai Xiaochun, her eyes glistened like deep pools of pure water. Her teeth were smooth and white, her lips plump and red. Anyone who looked at her would think they were seeing the beauty of humanity personified. "You can turn around now," she said softly. Remaining ever vigilant, Bai Xiaochun slowly turned around, making sure to keep the disappointed expression on his face. At the same time, his veins of steel were visible as he laid eyes on Song Junwan. Almost immediately, he was shaken to the core. He had seen beautiful women before, such as Hu Xiaomei, Zhou Xinqi, or the missing Du Lingfei. They were all exquisitely good-looking. However, there was something graceful and elegant to Song Junwan that few women could compare to. Her previous flirtatious look had turned into something very dignified, and the change left Bai Xiaochun completely taken aback. It was a pure, clean beauty, like a hibiscus flower glistening in the morning dew. Completely and utterly astonishing. Despite being completely tongue-tied and anxious, Bai Xiaochun's vigilance didn't reduce in the slightest. On the contrary, it grew stronger. This Song Junwan, she's the ultimate vixen. Seeing Bai Xiaochun's reaction, Song Junwan covered her smile with her hand. There was nothing coquettish about it this time. It was actually very charming, and the look in her eyes caused Bai Xiaochun's heart to leap. What's she doing now? He thought, so nervous that his heart was pounding in his chest. For some reason, this latest tactic of hers seemed far more powerful than her opening move. Presumably, she would be making her counterattack at any moment. Was she moving in for the kill? She smiled charmingly, and before he could respond, she continued on in a serious voice, "Very well, I'm giving you back the Song Junwan that exists in your heart. Happy now? The reason I asked you here was to tell you something. Go back and pack your bags. We'll meet tomorrow at dawn, at the base of Middle Peak. You'll be joining me as I go with one of my Song clan's patriarchs to visit the Spirit Stream Sect. That Song clan patriarch is also one of the 8 patriarchs of the Bloodstream Sect." Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and when he heard her mention the Spirit Stream Sect, his heart trembled. A diplomatic mission to the Spirit Stream Sect? Bai Xiaochun was taken aback. The idea of going back to the Spirit Stream Sect as Night Crypt was strange to say the least. Song Junwan looked at him and smiled. "What's wrong? You don't want to go? I didn't originally plan to take you. However, if I leave you behind, that slut Shui Mei might cause problems. Since I can't stay to protect you, then I'd prefer to take you with me. You need to be very careful whenever you see that whore. She's ruthless, and also reached 9 Earthstring tide flows. Her father is Patriarch Limitless, and she herself is a potential future matriarch of the sect. There's nothing she won't do to reach her goals. She and I have never gotten along. The slut thinks that she can rely on her status to steal my rightful spot as Blood Master of Middle Peak. But how could I possibly let her do such a thing?" Almost as soon as Song Junwan mentioned Shui Mei, her eyes flickered with cold light. However, seemingly worried that such a look wouldn't conform with Bai Xiaochun's image of her, she suddenly felt the need to explain further. From generation to generation, there have always been 4 Blood Masters. By now, the Blood Masters of the other 3 mountain peaks have already been selected. Only Middle Peak has none. Blood Master is a very high position, similar to that of Prime Elder. After reaching core formation, Blood Masters become Blood Rippers, which are second only to the Patriarchs. Of course, in order to become a Blood Ripper, you have to first become a Blood Master. The position of Middle Peak Blood Master has belonged to the Song clan for many, many years. But this time, Shui Mei reached 9 tide flows, and thinks she can steal it away. If I fail, then the Song clan's power will weaken in the sect, and I can't let that happen. Having finished her explanation, Song Junwan looked at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath. Then, after a moment of thought, he asked, "Why exactly are we going to the Spirit Stream Sect?" Song Junwan hesitated for a moment. Before what had just happened, she would never have divulged the secret. But now, after a moment of thought, she waved her hand, activating her cave's spell formation, and sealing the 2 of them in alone. Then she began to explain. Song Junwan looked at Bai Xiaochun and said, "You and I won't be the only ones going with the Patriarch on the diplomatic mission to the Spirit Stream Sect. There will be others. However, Middle Peak will be in charge. There are 2 purposes to the mission, one primary and one secondary. Let's start with the secondary purpose. We want to get a first-hand look at Bai Xiaochun. When Song Junwan spoke Bai Xiaochun's name, her eyes flickered with intense coldness. Bai Xiaochun's nervousness mounted, especially when he saw that cold look. From the way she was looking at him, it seemed as if her killing intent were rising to explosive levels. He gritted his teeth. Killing intent overflowing, he said, back in the fallen sword abyss, Bai Xiaochun and I sparked the greatest of enmities. My hatred for him runs as deep as the sea. I refuse to live under the same sky as him. You had better not, under any circumstances, allow me to run into him, otherwise I'll do everything in my power to kill him. Of course, he really felt that he was getting the short end of the stick in this situation, and hoped that Song Junwan wouldn't be offended. Song Junwan nodded. Sighing, she said, Bai Xiaochun stole Quer's Heavenstring Foundation establishment and destroyed all of the Song clan's plans. The clan paid a very heavy price to get that chance. We bought the secrets of the Heaven Dao cultivation base from Patriarch Limitless, all for the purpose of Quer becoming Middle Peak's Bloodmaster. But now, it's too late for that. Quer only reached 8 tide flows and can't possibly fight Shui Mei. Now I'm the only one who has a chance at the Bloodmaster spot. As of this moment, she seemed more than ever like she wanted to kill the Spirit Stream Sect's Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, then began to nod deeply as if he approved of what she was saying. Yeah, that's right, he said, feeling quite proud of himself. If it weren't for Bai Xiaochun, Quer would definitely have reached Heaven Dao Foundation establishment. He couldn't help but imagine the glorious expression Song Ke would have on his face if he were present to hear himself called Quer. Song Junwan continued in a soft voice. The main reason for the diplomatic mission, though, is to see if war is really going to break out between the Bloodstream Sect and Spirit Stream Sect. As she spoke, it almost seemed as if she could see the future war playing out. Bai Xiaochun's scalp was tingling so hard it felt like it might explode. Although he had always known that war was likely to break out between the Bloodstream Sect and the Spirit Stream Sect, he didn't want that to happen. War was a brutal thing, and if it truly occurred, many people would die. The Profound Stream Sect and the Pill Stream Sect have already been fighting for some time. The Pill Stream Sect is weak, and have already begged the Bloodstream Sect for help. However, at the same time, it is highly likely that the Profound Stream Sect and the Spirit Stream Sect have been in secret negotiations regarding an alliance. If they're doing that, then so can we. The most interesting thing of all is that the Profound Stream Sect also hinted to us about an alliance in the past. However, that seemed a last-minute thing, something doomed from the beginning to collapse. From all of this, we can see how much scheming and plotting is going on. In the end, the sects can only trust and rely on themselves. Although Song Junwan's eyes seemed to contain a bit of cynicism, there was an icy coldness deep within that. Bai Xiaochun didn't say anything at first. This wasn't the first time he'd heard about the war between the Profound and Pill Stream sects. From the rumors he had caught wind of in the sect, the war had already reached a very brutal level, with countless casualties on both sides. It's hard to see where the true battlefield lies. Although the Profound and Pill Stream sects are fighting each other, for all we know, they might end up as allies in the end. It's always difficult to tell who your true enemies are. Determining the identity of your true foe is the most critical aspect of war. Considering the importance of what is at stake, the stream sects are going crazy. Night Crypt. War is not too far off. It could break out at any moment. Furthermore, biding time and waiting for the outbreak, waiting until the battle lines are drawn, is not necessarily the best decision. If too much time goes by, it's possible that two of the other sects could form an alliance. Maybe even all three of them. They might all join forces to defeat the Bloodstream sect. After all, we are the strongest sect. As the saying goes, once you start riding a tiger, it's hard to get off, so we need to take advantage of the moment before true war breaks out to seize the advantage. Song Junwan sighed and looked at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun smiled wryly. From the perspective of the Bloodstream sect, this was exactly the right move. If they let things progress too far along without making a move, the other three sects might form an alliance. In that case, the Bloodstream sect would be at a distinct disadvantage, and might even suffer a bitter loss. This time, there will be a war. And the Bloodstream sect must rise up to become a Middle Reaches sect. At this point, Song Junwan went on to explain matters regarding the Sky River Court in the Middle Reaches. For the most part, her explanation matched the explanation given by sect leader Zheng Yuandong of the Spirit Stream sect. Bai Xiaochun listened quietly and didn't ask any questions. If war breaks out, she continued, we really have only one option, and that is to fight the Spirit Stream sect. After all, the four great sects are located on the tributaries in the following order: Blood, Spirit, Profound, Pill. The closest to us is the Spirit Stream Sect. If we do start fighting, the Bloodstream Sect is confident of winning. But that doesn't mean the Spirit Stream Sect can be underestimated. They are adept at hiding their resources, and have profound reserves built up. Although we would suffer heavy losses, the Spirit Stream Sect would be destroyed in the end. But then we would have to face the advance of the Profound Stream Sect. Even if we came out victorious against them, there wouldn't be many survivors. If all of the sects ended up suffering heavy casualties, there would be no hope of being powerful enough to take out the Sky River Court. Any chance of rising up to a higher position would be dashed. Song Junwan frowned. By now, she was divulging information that an ordinary Dharma protector would never have access to. Only the higher echelons in the leadership of the Bloodstream Sect would be privy to such matters. Bai Xiaochun's heart trembled. After coming to the Bloodstream Sect, he had become very familiar with how powerful and savage they were, and was certain that if war erupted, the Spirit Stream Sect wouldn't be a match for them. He could only imagine what it would be like to see so many faces he knew awash with blood, never to open their eyes again. The war would be one in which the Spirit Stream Sect was wiped out, and the Bloodstream Sect suffered severe losses. The truth is, we don't actually want such a war to happen. If we could prevent it, and maintain the full strength of the Bloodstream Sect, then the Profound Stream Sect and Pillstream Sect could be easily wiped out. Then, we would be much more confident in maintaining the strength necessary to defeat the Sky River Court. At this point, Song Junwan's eyes shone with a mysterious light. Our biggest concern is this: when the Bloodstream Sect finally moves to take out the Sky River Court, what would happen if the Spirit Stream Sect suddenly allied with the Sky River Court? Then we would be wiped out for sure. No amount of promises, not even oaths sworn to the Tao of the Heavens, can be trusted when it comes to matters affecting the entire sect. Therefore, after much discussion, the patriarchs have chosen to send a diplomatic mission. If the Spirit Stream Sect agrees, then we will promise not to fight them. The Spirit Stream Sect will not be exterminated, nor will the Bloodstream Sect suffer heavy casualties. To hear such words coming from Song Junwan's mouth caused Bai Xiaochun's heart to tremble. As far as he was concerned, the best outcome would be no war at all between the two sects. However, that agreement would involve the Bloodstream Sect setting up an enormous spell formation on the Spirit Stream Sect's portion of the Heavenspan River. That spell formation would seal their sect for 1,000 years. During those 1,000 years, anyone would be able to enter, but no one would be able to leave. Disciples of the Spirit Stream Sect would be unable to go out into the Eastwood continent, and the Spirit Stream Sect's portion of the Heavenspan River would waste away to some degree. Their spiritual energy would grow weaker. However, it would only be for a short 1,000-year period. Afterward, the Bloodstream Sect would be in a stable position in the middle reaches, and would undo the seal. That is the only circumstance in which we could trust the Spirit Stream Sect, and the only way to prevent war between the two of us. Not a single person from the Spirit Stream Sect would die, and the Bloodstream Sect would definitely succeed in rising up to a new level. By the time Song Junwan finished explaining everything to Bai Xiaochun, she was almost panting. As for Bai Xiaochun, great waves of shock filled his heart. From what he knew, it seemed unlikely that the Spirit Stream Sect would agree to such terms. To be sealed for 1,000 years was basically a prison sentence. Most frustrating of all would be the situation after the 1,000-year period ended. However, from the standpoint of the Bloodstream Sect, there seemed to be no other options. They didn't want to go to war, but there was no way they could put faith in simple promises or agreements. They could only trust a powerful magical seal. Bai Xiaochun was a bit at a loss. It was a weighty matter, so much so that he felt almost as if he were being suffocated. He wasn't sure what choice the Spirit Stream Sect patriarchs would make. Would they go to war? Song Junwan smiled. Very well, there's no need to think too much into the deep things. The patriarchs will handle everything. In the end, there will be war, the question is only who we'll fight. After chatting a bit longer about trivialities, she could tell that Bai Xiaochun was a bit stunned. She didn't seem upset. After all, it was only natural to react in such a way to news like this. In fact, when she had heard the information a few days ago, and realized that bitter war would be coming, she had also been shaken for some time. With that, she dismissed him. However, even as he turned to leave, Song Junwan suddenly seemed to remember something, and said, Shui Mei was lying. For the entire time I've practiced cultivation, I've never had any Taoist partners to pick from. In fact, I've never even had a Taoist partner. She wasn't really sure why she felt the need to explain such a thing, and after the words came out of her mouth, she found them to be so outrageous that her face immediately turned bright red. Huh? Bai Xiaochun said, stopping in place and looking back at her. When he saw her flushed cheeks and lovely dimples, she looked even more charming than before. Another deadly move, he thought, gasping inwardly. Ducking his head, he hurried out of the immortal's cave. The whole time, he was thinking that the 2 moves she had used after her transformation were quite formidable. In fact, he had felt almost powerless to resist them. Sometime later, he was back in his immortal's cave, where he sat down cross-legged to think about everything that Song Junwan had told him. Finally, he sighed. Is there really no other way? 3 days later at dawn, Bai Xiaochun was not in a very good mood. The more he thought about war breaking out between the 2 sects, the worse he felt. On top of that, he now realized that the only reason he was going along on the diplomatic mission was because of his own stellar performance to the Grand Elder. Were it not for that, he could have taken advantage of her absence to sneak into her immortal's cave and search for the relic of eternal indestructibility. However, after reminding himself about how strictly guarded it was, he shook his head. Inwardly, he was scowling miserably, but to everyone who looked at him, he simply looked cold and sinister. After leaving his immortal's cave, he went down to the bottom of Middle Peak, where a few cultivators were already gathered. There were a dozen or so there, many of whose faces went grim as soon as they laid eyes on him. A few had no reaction, though. Master God Diviner was one of the cultivators in the group. As soon as he saw Bai Xiaochun, his expression flickered. Suddenly seeming to remember something, his eyes turned icy, and he gave a disdainful snort. Before, he had been scared of Bai Xiaochun, but considering the Dao oath he had made to young lady Shui Mei, making him one of her subordinates, his fear had been significantly reduced. Everybody is backed by someone powerful, he thought, chuckling coldly. Let's see you try to cause trouble for me now. Bai Xiaochun wasn't paying attention to the various looks given him by the other cultivators. He chose a spot near the back of the group to sit down cross-legged. There had been a couple others sitting in the area, but as soon as he arrived, they respectfully made room. Nightcrypt's name had already spread near and far. Before much time passed, more beams of light appeared. There were people in all levels of the Foundation establishment stage, and after enough time passed for half an incense stick to burn, Grand Elder Song Junwan appeared, escorted by 2 Bloodstreak elders. Everyone rose to their feet and clasped hands in greeting. However, it was to the shock of everyone present that the previously smoking hot Grand Elder Song Junwan was wearing different clothing than usual. She no longer seemed overtly sexy, but rather, somewhat conservative. Of course, her fundamental good looks hadn't changed, and in fact, her new style made her seem, not less beautiful, but more so. All of the cultivators present were surprised, and many of them looked at her with wide eyes. Song Junwan smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. Many people were dazzled, and as for Bai Xiaochun, his heart began to beat faster. Song Junwan looked over the group, and when her gaze came to rest on Bai Xiaochun for a moment, her eyes suddenly widened into an angry glare. Another tricky move, he thought, even more nervous than before. He immediately upped his level of vigilance. He was coming to find that Song Junwan was really hard to figure out. 3 days before, she had been smiling like a flower, but now she was glaring at him. Even before he could begin to analyze the situation, Song Junwan's voice echoed out for all to hear. All of you will be accompanying the Patriarch on a diplomatic mission to the Spirit Stream Sect. Be on your best behavior, and don't lose face for the Bloodstream Sect. She was no longer smiling, and her serious tone provoked nods of response among the crowd. It was at about this time that a blood cloud appeared near Ancestor Peak. Thunderous rumbling sounds could be heard as the cloud rapidly grew to 300 meters in size. Then it began to float down in their direction. Standing atop the cloud was an old man wearing a violet robe. He had a tall crown on his head, and despite his age, stood ramrod straight. He seemed threatening without being angry, and had a shocking aura that filled everyone with a sensation of madness and profundity. The Song clan patriarch, Bai Xiaochun thought, a tremor running through him. He immediately bowed his head. The old man seemed completely impossible to judge, as though a single strand of divine wool from him could cause unending torment. The other cultivators in the area were also shocked, and clasped hands respectfully. Greetings, Patriarch. Everyone has assembled, I see, the Song clan patriarch said. Very well. It's about time to leave for the Spirit Stream Sect. As his voice echoed out from the cloud, he looked down at the group. That simple gaze caused everyone to feel as if winter were raging inside their bodies, as intense coldness seeped into the depths of their hearts. Bai Xiaochun was a bit shocked. Including this old man, he had now seen 2 patriarchs of the Bloodstream Sect, the first one being Patriarch Limitless. Of the two of them, Bai Xiaochun was of the opinion that Patriarch Limitless was not quite as frightening as the Song Clan Patriarch. Oh, that's right, he thought. Patriarch Limitless just recently became a patriarch. He's not as strong, and is also younger than the Song Clan Patriarch. This guy is an old hand, his cultivation base must be terrifyingly powerful. He's probably lived for years and years. Suddenly, he gasped as he realized that his body had been grabbed by some invisible force, and was now flying through the air. Up he went, and in the blink of an eye, was on top of the blood cloud. To his surprise, although the surface of the cloud was fluffy, it was resilient. Looking down, he could see all of the bloodstream sect below him. A moment later, the blood cloud shot off into the distance. Soon, the ground was speeding along down below. From what Bai Xiaochun could tell, even if he went all out, he couldn't even go a third as fast as this. So, this is a patriarch, he thought, swallowing hard. Looking around, he saw all of the other middle peak cultivators around him, including Master God Diviner. None of them seemed to be taking things in stride as well as Bai Xiaochun. Their faces were ashen, and they were clearly shocked. Only Song Junwan and the two Bloodstreak elders seemed calm. Sitting cross-legged at the very front, surrounded by a spinning vortex, was the shocking and enigmatic Song Clan Patriarch. He was close enough now that they could see his flowing white hair and wrinkled face. There were even some brown age spots on his face. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn, Bai Xiaochun became accustomed to the speed, and examined his surroundings more closely. There was a defensive spell formation set up that protected the surface of the cloud, ensuring that only a bit of a breeze lifted his hair, and nothing more. For some reason, he felt a very mysterious excitement at the idea of being able to go back to the spirit stream sect as Night Crypt. He suddenly started thinking about everyone he knew. I wonder if I'll see Big Fatty Zhang, he thought. Will he recognize me? Heh. And what about Hu Xiaomei? What if I went and called her little sis as Night Crypt? And there's Zhou Xinqi, Xu Baosai, and Ghost Fong. The more he thought about everyone, the more he smiled. Even as he reveled in his excitement, a cold snort broke his train of thought, and he looked over to see Master God Diviner sitting not too far away, a disdainful and cold expression on his face. What are you looking at, Master Snortlaugh? Bai Xiaochun said coldly. As soon as the words left his mouth, everyone's ears perked up. They had been feeling a lot of pressure because of the Patriarch and the Grand Elder, and hadn't dared to do anything other than sit quietly. Now that they saw something going on between Night Crypt and Master God Diviner, they instantly started to get excited. That was especially true considering the sarcastic words Bai Xiaochun had just uttered. Many of them gaped in shock, temporarily unsure of how to react to hearing the words, Master Snortlaugh. What did you just say? Master God Diviner snapped, rage burning in his heart as he glowered at Bai Xiaochun. You don't like that name? Bai Xiaochun replied coolly, his expression indifferent. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you liked to snort. You've already snorted a bunch of times at me so far. If you snort one more time, I'm going to call you Master Snort. Of course, his words were just bait. Master God Diviner ground his teeth, and as for the other cultivators, some of them actually started laughing out loud. A moment later, Master God Diviner chuckled coldly. You, HMPH, so what if you have some sword chi? You and your clowning around make it impossible for anyone else to practice cultivation. You piece of garbage. It's only a matter of time before you get killed by young lady Shui Mei. Bai Xiaochun stuck his chin up proudly. You claim you have skill in divining things, you charlatan? You're nothing but a scam artist. Divining my ass. Let me tell you what. Night Crypt knows everything about the starry sky and the yellow springs. With one glance, I can figure out everything there is to know. With one flick of my sleeve, I could turn Master Snort into dust. With a patriarch present, no one would dare to start fighting. Bai Xiaochun loved it when talking was allowed but fighting was not, and in such situations, feared no one. As soon as the biting words left his mouth, eyes went wide among the onlookers. Only now did they understand how gifted Bai Xiaochun was with the tongue, although they couldn't help but look down on his bragging. As for Master God Diviner, everyone could see that, despite his rage, he was no match for Bai Xiaochun in a war of words. How shameless of you, HMPH. Gritting his teeth, Master God Diviner snorted coldly, but before he could say anything else, he was interrupted by Bai Xiaochun. See, you snorted again, didn't you, Master Snort? Listen, we need to talk this through. Stop with the snorting, okay? If you're snorting all the time at the Spirit Stream sect, people might think you're a pig transformed into human shape. That would be a big loss of face. He sighed. Master God Diviner wasn't sure why, but every time he ran into this person, his rage burned almost beyond control. The fact that he was tongue-tied in front of so many people got him so mad that he leapt to his feet. Bai Xiaochun's eyes flashed coldly, and he waved his right index finger, already starting to converge blood qi. When Master God Diviner saw that, his heart seized with shock. He had only stood up, he never imagined that his opponent would attack just because of that. It was in that instant Grand Elder Song Junwan's cold gaze flashed over toward them. Enough, she said coolly. Master God Diviner, sit down over there. Night Crypt, you sit next to me. Taking advantage of the moment, Master God Diviner sat down. He was just about to snort coldly when he thought back to Bai Xiaochun's words from just now, and held back. Inwardly, his hatred grew. Everyone else sat straight and tall, inwardly envious of Bai Xiaochun. Not only did he get to sit next to the Grand Elder, that got him closer to the Patriarch. As of this point, all of them realized that they should try to seize opportunities more often in the future. Grand Elder, I'm fine right here. Bai Xiaochun said, shrinking back a bit. Why don't I just? Before he could finish, Song Junwan stared at him icily and interrupted, get over here. Bai Xiaochun could do nothing more than glare one final time at Master God Diviner, and then begrudgingly stand up and walk over to the Grand Elder. Further up ahead, the Song clan patriarch sat there, his back straight, radiating the sensation of a vicious wild beast. Bai Xiaochun couldn't help but sweat and get even more nervous than before. Big sis Song, you look really pretty today, he said quickly. The two Bloodstreak elders sitting nearby looked over with strange expressions on their faces. Even the Song clan patriarch seemed surprised, and frowned. Song Junwan blushed slightly, then glared at Bai Xiaochun. Enough with the smooth talk. Sit down and be quiet. Bai Xiaochun was growing increasingly confused by Song Junwan's odd behavior. It was very different than how she had acted 3 days ago. After much thought, he still couldn't come up with any reasons why she would be behaving in such a way. Finally, he just sat there looking around, and occasionally glancing down at the ground. Soon, he saw a boundless mountain range down below. From this vantage point, the towering mountain peaks seemed to make up a spell formation. The Luokan Mountains, he thought. This was the area that lay between the Bloodstream Sect and the Spirit Stream Sect. More accurately, it was the border of Spirit Stream Sect territory. I can't believe we got here so quickly. Shocked, he looked down at the blood cloud. As it sped through the Luokan Mountains, powerful fluctuations seemed to rise up from the mountains, surrounding the blood cloud, locking down onto it, and following it as it proceeded along. Clearly, the Spirit Stream Sect was in control of the Bloodstream Sect's movements now. The Song clan patriarch's expression was the same as ever as he sat there meditating. Bai Xiaochun thought about it for a moment, and came to the realization that the Bloodstream Sect's diplomatic mission must have come about only after initial communications with the Spirit Stream Sect. As the blood cloud sped along, Bai Xiaochun watched the familiar scenery speeding past. He saw a huge giant, a rock-like bird, and an enormous crocodile splashing in the Heavenspan River, only half of its gigantic body visible. When the gigantic creatures saw the blood mist, they shied away from it, as though it contained some powerful entity that terrified them. Shocked, Bai Xiaochun looked over at the Song clan patriarch. However, he didn't say anything. The familiar scenery whizzed by, and soon they were closing in on the Spirit Stream Sect. Bai Xiaochun's heart instantly leapt. Even as Bai Xiaochun reveled in his excitement, Song Junwan's voice drifted into his ears. I heard that you had quite a few girlfriends in the Bloodstream Sect over the years. Is that true? Her voice was cold enough to pierce his bones, like a chill air that left Bai Xiaochun shivering. He looked over in shock at Song Junwan, who simply snorted coldly. Rising to her feet, she ignored Bai Xiaochun as she walked over to confer with the Song clan patriarch. The Bloodstreak elders did the same thing, and suddenly, Bai Xiaochun's anxiety increased. Feeling more wrong than ever, he now realized why Song Junwan had treated him so coldly. It's only been 3 days, and that shrew actually did a background check on me. Sighing in his heart, he thought back to the romantic escapades of imposter Night Crypt, who hadn't even been able to accurately recount how many there had been. Before long, the blood cloud began to slow down, and the Spirit Stream Sect spread out in front of their eyes. The Bloodstream Sect disciples rose to their feet, radiating brutality and power as they looked coldly at the Spirit Stream Sect. At the same time, pillars of light shot up from the 8 mountain peaks of the Spirit Stream Sect, creating an enormous vortex in the sky. Deafening rumbles echoed out as heaven-shaking, earth-shattering energy surged. The south and north banks of the Spirit Stream Sect both erupted with power, making heaven and earth seem like a raging sea filled with towering waves. Within the vortex, an eye appeared, which radiated boundless pressure as it stared at the Song clan patriarch on the blood cloud. The people from the bloodstream sect became like rowboats on a stormy sea, hovering on the verge of collapse because of the surge of energy of heaven and earth. Their faces flickered, except for that of the Song clan patriarch, whose expression remained calm the entire time. Slowly, his eyes opened, and in that instant, two beams of explosive light shot out. Mountain toppling, sea-draining power spread out, and as the patriarch rose to his feet, he flicked his sleeve and took a step out into midair. When his foot landed, he was in front of the heavenly vortex up above. Apparently, he was single-handedly resisting the boundless power therein. A white-robed, middle-aged man stepped out from the turbid eye in the middle of the vortex. Clasping hands, he smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Song Yunwen." Bai Xiaochun immediately recognized him. It was the same man who had appeared to offer assistance on the day Bruiser had come to life. He was one of the patriarchs of the Spirit Stream sect, a man with unfathomable energy that seemed roughly equivalent to the Song clan patriarchs. "Fellow Taoist Li Zimo." The Song clan patriarch smiled as he clasped hands in greeting. The two of them exchanged a glance, and then stepped into the vortex. Bai Xiaochun took a deep breath. Although he'd always taken the Song clan patriarch to be amazing, it was now extremely clear how incredible he was. Obviously, he wouldn't have come to the Spirit Stream sect alone if he weren't completely confident in his own strength. As the patriarchs entered the vortex, beams of light shot out from both the south and north banks of the Spirit Stream sect as numerous figures gathered in front of the blood cloud. The person in the lead was not Zheng Yuandong, but rather, Xu Meixiang. Next to her was the old woman from Irispetal Peak, who was flanked by Beihan Lai and some other young woman that Bai Xiaochun had never seen before. Next to Xu Meixiang were Big Fatty Zhang and Lu Tinlei. Further back were several dozen Foundation establishment cultivators from the south and north banks. Virtually all of them were familiar to Bai Xiaochun, especially those whom he had assisted in the Fallen Sword Abyss. "Middle Peak Grand Elder, you have come from afar to visit," Xu Meixiang said with a smile. "The sect leader is in secluded meditation, so I've come to receive you. Please, follow me." Xu Meixiang's gaze swept over the crowd and seemed to linger on a few particular individuals, Bai Xiaochun included. Song Junwan smiled slightly and replied, "Peak Lord Xu, there's no need for such courtesy. Please lead the way." With that, she stepped off the blood cloud. Bai Xiaochun and the other cultivators from the Bloodstream sect followed close behind. The gazes of the Spirit Stream sect cultivators were not welcoming. Although the Bloodstream sect cultivators had their murderous auras, the Spirit Stream sect cultivators' eyes flickered with killing intent. Clearly, this generation of Foundation establishment experts from the Spirit Stream sect had all experienced fighting and bloodshed. They had a large number of Earthstring Foundation establishment cultivators, and although Song Junwan had been aware of this fact, the sight of it caused her eyes to widen. Song Junwan and Xu Meixiang took the lead, chatting conversationally, but simultaneously probing each other for information. As for the two Bloodstreak elders, they were accompanied by the old woman from Irispetal Peak. The other cultivators were all escorted by various people from the Spirit Stream sect, who seemed to be forcibly restraining themselves. Bai Xiaochun was joined by no ordinary cultivator, but rather, by North Bank chosen Beihan Lai. His expression was somber, his gaze penetrating, and he seemed to be constantly on guard as he proceeded along next to Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun sighed. For some reason, he suddenly felt the intense urge to call out greetings to everyone he knew. The group flew into the Spirit Stream sect to Mount Daoseed. After landing, the people from the south and north banks stared icily at the group from the Bloodstream sect. A somber, murderous aura was slowly building up. "Ah, it's so great to be home. Especially when nobody can recognize you." Bai Xiaochun looked around excitedly, and his gaze was drawn repeatedly back to the unfamiliar young woman who accompanied the old woman from Irispetal Peak. She was strikingly beautiful, and Bai Xiaochun was surprised that he had never seen her before. "Looks like the North Bank must have some new blood," he thought, feeling more than ever like a member of the senior generation. Sighing in satisfaction, he looked over at Big Fatty Zhang. "I can't believe Big Fatty Zhang is in the 10th level of qi condensation," he thought, sighing emotionally. However, every time Bai Xiaochun turned his attention to a different person, Beihan Lai would get very nervous, and would tense up vigilantly, and seem to radiate a brutal, bloodthirsty air. He couldn't help but be shaken by the various stories he'd heard about this night crypt. According to the rumors, this night crypt is particularly vicious, he thought. He cuts people down like scything wheat. He's quite the womanizer, and apparently has very low standards. People say he loves the taste of human blood, and demands to drink it every day. Furthermore, he won't rest until he's sated his desire for women. On a daily basis. This guy is a complete and utter devil. Not only does he have a multifarious personality, he's completely and utterly brutal. Damn it, he's looking at junior sister Fang and big fatty Zhang. Just what is he planning? Even as Bai Hanlai's anxiety grew, Bai Xiaochun looked over at him and smiled. To Bai Hanlai, Night Crypt's smile seemed cruel and ferocious. But then he realized that even as Night Crypt smiled at him, he raised his eyebrow, almost as if he were flirting. Bai Hanlai gasped, and his expression flickered. No need to get nervous, Bai Xiaochun quickly said. If he hadn't said anything, nothing would have happened, but since he did, Bai Hanlai's right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, and a magical item shimmered into being. He wasn't the only one to react in such a way. Other spirit stream sect cultivators could detect what was happening, and looked over menacingly at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun frowned. As far as he was concerned, he had just been saying hello to an old friend. However, even Song Junwan and Xu Meixiang could sense what was happening. When they looked back, Xu Meixiang's eyes widened. Big Fatty Zhang and Lu Tinlei looked over with grim expressions, and even the old woman from Iris Betel Peak reacted similarly. Everyone from the Spirit Stream sect had heard information about the infamous Night Crypt, and had even seen pictures of him, so they immediately recognized him. That was especially true of Lu Tinlei. With a challenging gleam in his eyes, he flew over toward Bai Xiaochun, whereupon he took his place next to Bai Hanlai. Clearly, Night Crypt's reputation in the Spirit Stream sect was one of complete and utter ferocity. Bai Xiaochun glared at Lu Tinlei. Things weren't like they had been long ago in the Spirit Stream sect, and Bai Xiaochun couldn't believe that Lu Tinlei would actually have the gall to challenge him openly. Who might that be? Xu Meixiang said, pretending not to know. That's my junior brother Night Crypt, Song Junwan replied with a smile. Then she changed the subject. I've heard that the Spirit Stream sect's legacy echelon designate reached Heaven Dao Foundation establishment? Would it be possible to pay Bai Xiaochun a visit? Even as Bai Xiaochun was staring in shock at Lu Tinlei, he heard Song Junwan mention his name, and his ears twitched. He wasn't the only one. The other cultivators from the Bloodstream sect went completely silent and looked over at Song Junwan. Bai Xiaochun was completely infamous in the Bloodstream sect. Not only had he stolen Heaven String energy from Song Ke, he had slaughtered countless of their fellow disciples in the Fallen Sword Abyss. For these and other reasons, he was a very important figure who was quite well known. Grand Elder Song, your timing is a bit off, Xu Meixiang said sadly. Junior brother Bai is currently in secluded meditation. Song Junwan smiled. Shaking her head, she sighed wistfully and said, I heard Bai Xiaochun is a mysterious and enigmatic figure, a unique genius. What a pity that I won't be able to meet him. Her good looks combined with her display of emotion made her seem extraordinarily attractive. Although Xu Meixiang was gorgeous in her own way, she seemed almost average in comparison to Song Junwan. The crowd from the Bloodstream sect were well aware of how terrifying Song Junwan could be, so they quickly bowed their heads. However, the Spirit Stream sect cultivators hadn't been prepared for Song Junwan's beauty, and couldn't help but look over at her, somewhat dazed. Lu Tinlei's eyes shone especially brightly. Xu Meixiang's eyes glittered as she said, Grand Elder Song, with a natural-born charmer like you in the sect, how do Bloodstream sect disciples on Middle Peak ever focus on cultivation? Her words instantly shook the Spirit Stream sect cultivators out of their reveries. Bai Xiaochun sighed. Feeling more proud than ever, he suddenly wished he could rip off his mask and tell the vixen Song Junwan, enough with your scheming, Song Junwan. Lord Bai is right here. He looked over a bit contemptuously at Lu Tinlei, who still seemed to be partially in a daze. Then he congratulated himself on his wisdom of getting Song Junwan to change clothes. If she had worn the smoking hot outfit she used to wear, Lu Tinlei would likely have coughed up mouthfuls of blood. Even as Bai Xiaochun sighed inwardly, Song Junwan covered her mouth with her hand and laughed lightly. Seemingly unaware of the sarcasm in Xu Meixiang's words, she looked over at the south bank of the Spirit Stream sect and said, I heard that Bai Xiaochun started out on Fragrant Cloud Peak. Peak Lord Xu, do you think it would be possible to go take a quick tour? Xu Meixiang had no reason to refuse. In fact, her mission was to show the Bloodstream sect people around. With a nod, she led them toward Fragrant Cloud Peak. As they neared, a beam of light flew toward them, within which was a young woman. She wore a long blue gown, and was exceptionally good-looking. She almost looked like a celestial goddess. She was none other than Zhou Xinqi. Many of the Bloodstream sect disciples recognized her, and their expressions turned very serious. Greetings, Peak Lord, she said calmly, hands clasped respectfully. Then she looked over at the people from the Bloodstream sect. Xu Meixiang smiled and said, Xinqi, this is Grand Elder Song Junwan from Middle Peak in the Bloodstream sect. Would you mind showing us around Fragrant Cloud Peak? Zhou Xinqi nodded, then led the group onward. They started at the foot of the mountain, taking a route that had already been planned out in advance by the sect. Everything that the Bloodstream sect was able to see had been specially arranged by the Spirit Stream sect for certain reasons. Even the disciples who they encountered along the way had been placed there by special arrangement. Bai Xiaochun looked around at Fragrant Cloud Peak, at all the plants and trees, at Zhou Xinqi as she led them along, and sighed inwardly. I, Bai Xiaochun, really have become too famous. Everybody has heard about me. Even Song Junwan came from far, far away just to meet me. I really need to keep a lower profile. Being famous is really annoying. He sighed the whole way. Eventually, about halfway through the tour, Song Junwan frowned slightly and said, Peak Lord Shu, fellow Taoist Zhou, since Heaven Dao Foundation establishment expert Bai Xiaochun started out on Fragrant Cloud Peak, do you think it would possible for us to take a look at his old immortals cave? Zhou Xinqi frowned and looked at Xu Meixiang. Xu Meixiang's eyes glittered, and she returned Song Junwan's gaze with a smile. I've heard of someone from Middle Peak in the Bloodstream sect, she said, someone called Master God Diviner, an expert in consulting the heavens. Considering the excellent reputation of this fellow Taoist, what do you say we let him perform some divinations to locate the immortals cave of my junior brother Bai? Xu Meixiang looked over at Master God Diviner. Master God Diviner's expression was cold and aloof, and inwardly he was feeling very proud of himself. Song Junwan's eyes narrowed slightly, but after some thought she turned to Master God Diviner and nodded. Master God Diviner cleared his throat, reminding himself that this was his chance to shine, and that he had to take advantage of it. He had to show off his abilities to the fullest extent. I might not have powerful combat magic, but when it comes to divining things from the heavens, I'm the best there is, and nobody even dares to call themselves second in line to me. Glancing contemptuously over at Bai Xiaochun, Master God Diviner took a few steps forward. As everyone from both the Spirit Stream sect and the Bloodstream sect looked on, he lifted his right hand and performed an incantation gesture. At the same time, his eyes seemed to flicker with the shining light of augury. Muttering to himself, his hand flashed faster and faster, and images seemed to be flickering through his eyes. But then a mist seemed to cover his eyes, making it impossible for him to see clearly. So, it's protected by a spell formation, Master God Diviner said, chuckling coldly. Apparently he was prepared for this. Slapping his bag of holding, he produced a great chunk of bone that radiated the power of time. Pressing down hard onto the piece of bone, he performed more auguries. Gray wisps of smoke rose up from the bone, which Master God Diviner breathed in. Off to the side, Xu Meixiang and everyone else was watching with bated breath. Master God Diviner's face slowly turned very pale, and beads of sweat popped out on his forehead. Moments later, his eyes opened wide. To his surprise, none of his efforts so far had produced any results. Not even his ancient chunk of bone was capable of penetrating the Spirit Stream sect's terrifyingly powerful spell formation. It was so strong that it resisted all intrusive augury magics. In fact, he could tell that if he performed any further auguries, he would be hit with a backlash that would severely drain him mentally, and potentially even wither him to the point of death. Not daring to continue any further, he gave up. Eyes flashing, he looked over at Bai Xiaochun, who seemed to be enjoying the show. Killing intent rose up inside of Master God Diviner. Stepping back, he turned to Song Junwan and clasped hands formally. Along the way here, junior brother Nightcrypt said that he knows everything about the starry sky and the yellow springs. He said that he could wave his sleeve and figure out everything there is to know. Although I, Master God Diviner, cannot determine the location of Bai Xiaochun's immortals cave here on Fragrant Cloud Peak, perhaps junior brother Nightcrypt can divine its location. With his immortal divination magic, he will surely be able to succeed with little effort. Isn't that right, junior brother Nightcrypt? With that, he stared coldly at Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun was a bit taken aback. He had merely been enjoying the show, and had never imagined that the shameless Master God Diviner would pull him into the matter after his own failure. Master God Diviner's pale, sweaty face made it clear how difficult, and even dangerous, it would be to perform auguries here. Xu Meixiang looked over curiously at Bai Xiaochun. Zhou Xinqi's gaze was ice cold, and the others from the Spirit Stream sect had very serious looks on their faces. As for the group from the Bloodstream sect, all of them seemed very interested in what would happen next. Song Junwan frowned, and was about to say something when Master God Diviner laughed coldly and said, Junior brother Nightcrypt, on the way here you said you knew everything about everything. What's wrong? Too scared to perform auguries now? Could it be that everything you said before was mere boasting? If you can divine the location of Bai Xiaochun's immortals cave, then I, Master God Diviner, will gracefully concede defeat. In fact, I'll even bow to you as an inferior." In response to Master God Diviner's words, silence reigned. The Spirit Stream Sect seemed pleased to see the infighting between members of the Bloodstream Sect, especially between two famous individuals like Nightcrypt and Master God Diviner. As far as they were concerned, it was a good thing. On the Bloodstream Sect side, they were just as willing to see Nightcrypt make a fool of himself. That was especially true considering how Master God Diviner had worded things, which ensured that none of them would say a single word to intervene. Song Junwan's eyes narrowed further. She was not happy at all about what Master God Diviner was doing, and it caused her eyes to shine with cold light. Seeing everyone looking at him, Bai Xiaochun blinked. How could he not know the location of his own immortal's cave? Furthermore, it wouldn't hurt at all to take everyone over to see it. There was nothing inside to look at anyway, considering it had long since been reduced to ruins. Therefore, he proudly stuck his chin up and looked contemptuously over at Master God Diviner. Clearing his throat, he took a few steps forward and coolly said, "Fine. I, Nightcrypt, have always preferred to keep a low profile. I was never interested in revealing my true skills and abilities here in the Spirit Stream Sect. After all, once I do, it will surely lead to countless headaches. However, since Master God Diviner is taking things so seriously, then I guess I have no choice than to perform some divination." Waving his sleeve, his eyes began to show with a profound light, and he seemed to seethe with explosive energy. His hair suddenly whipped about in the air, but instead of performing incantation gestures or muttering to himself, he simply closed his eyes and raised his hands into the air. It almost seemed as if he were communing with heaven and earth, becoming one with the world around him. The sight caused Master God Diviner to chuckle coldly under the belief that Bai Xiaochun was simply trying to dazzle everyone with meaningless tricks. "I couldn't detect even the slightest fluctuations," he thought. "What makes you think you can divine anything?" One breath of time after another passed. After about 20, Master God Diviner's smile grew even colder, and the surrounding cultivators were starting to feel a bit skeptical. But then, Bai Xiaochun's eyes snapped open, and they shone with bright, mysterious light. Without any hesitation, he pointed off into the distance. "There, follow me." Striding forward, he led the crowd through fragrant Cloud Peak until they reached a location that seemed to be nothing more than a pile of rubble. "This is Bai Xiaochun's immortal's cave," he declared proudly, his voice so decisive that it could sever nails and chop iron. "Are you joking?" Master God Diviner said in a bitingly cynical voice. "This pile of rocks is Bai Xiaochun's immortal's cave?" Even as he began to laugh coldly, he suddenly felt as if something were off. Looking around at the Spirit Stream Sect cultivators, his eyes widened. Zhou Xingqi's jaw had dropped, and Xu Meixiang was gasping. Big Fatty Zhang trembled visibly, and the other Spirit Stream Sect cultivators seemed equally taken aback. All of them were looking at Bai Xiaochun, their eyes shining with indescribably bright light. Obviously, they were surprised, shaken even, by the enigmatic performance of Nightcrypt. That was especially true of Zhou Xingqi and Xu Meixiang. They were familiar with the workings of the spell formation, and couldn't imagine how powerful a divination magic would have to be to penetrate it. When the Bloodstream Sect people saw the expressions on the faces of the Spirit Stream Sect cultivators, they realized that Nightcrypt had correctly divined the location of Bai Xiaochun's immortal's cave. Instantly, their hearts swelled with shock. Although most Bloodstream Sect cultivators could perform a bit of divination magic, most of them were complete novices. It was rare for someone like Master God Diviner to come along who could master the arts. And yet, Nightcrypt had just completely crushed Master God Diviner. It was a completely shocking turn of events. Song Junwan was equally stunned. Looking over at Bai Xiaochun, her expression grew more complex than before. Never could she have imagined that he would actually successfully perform the divination. Master God Diviner was flabbergasted and began to tremble in disbelief. "Impossible. This is impossible." Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.